This is Jacob's Algebra, Chapter 14, Lesson 2. This lesson is about irrational numbers. Irrational numbers are numbers that cannot be written as a fraction of two integers. When you're looking at square roots, the square root of any number that isn't a square is going to be irrational. So, hold on, I can't find my pen there. There it is. So the square root of 2, I'll do a list up here of irrational and rational. Square root of 2 is irrational because 2 is not a square. The square root of 3 is irrational because 3 is not a square. The square root of 4 is rational because that equals 2. The square root of 5 is irrational. The square root of 6 is irrational. Square root of 7, square root of 8. But the square root of 9 is rational because that equals 3. Square root of 10 is irrational. Square root of 11, square root of 12, square root of 13, square root of 14, square root of 15. But then the square root of 16 is rational because that equals 4. So in order for a square root to be rational, what's inside of the square root has to be a square number. Now it can even be a fraction. If you have the square root of 1/4, that's the same as 1 over the square root of 4, which is 1/2, and that's rational. So as long as whatever is inside of the square root is a square, if it's a fraction, then both the numerator and the denominator must be squares, then you have a rational number. Otherwise, you have an irrational number. So let's start looking at this lesson. Number 4 says to draw an accurate number line and mark the points corresponding to the following numbers on it. So you can draw your number line vertically or horizontally. I'm going to go ahead and draw a vertical number line. Sorry, I didn't quite draw that long enough. Okay, now I'm going to put marks on it. So let me try and get these marks evenly spaced. Okay, so I went ahead and finished off drawing my number line. And we're given a whole bunch of different things that we need to locate on the number line. So first we need to find -4. Well, that's right here. So I'm just going to write -4 next to it. Then we need to find, for part B, 2.5. Well, that's halfway between the 2 and the 3. So I'm going to write 2.5 right there. Here's my -4. The next one we have is -1.6. Well, that's going to be a little bit closer to -2 than it is to -1. So about there, -1.6. The next one is square root of 9. Well, square root of 9 is equal to 3. So square root of 9 is going to be right here at 3. Then we have 5/6. Okay, we need to put that in a calculator to see what 5/6 equals to. 5/6 is equal to 0.83 continuous. So that means it's going to be most of the way towards 1, but not all the way. So it's about here, and that is our fraction 5/6. Then we have square root 3. That's another punch in the calculator one. When you put square root 3 in the calculator, you get 1.732, and it goes on for a ways because that one actually never ends or repeats. So about 1.7 on our number line, that's going to be about 3/4 of the way between 1 and 2. So I'm going to say that's about here. So there's our square root 3. The next one is -7/3. -7/3 is -2.3 repeating. So that's going to be about 1/3 of the way between the -2 and the -3. So that's going to be about here, -7/3. And then we have 0.3 repeating. So that's going to be about here, 1/3 of the way from 0 to 1. So that's 0.3 repeating. And then we have negative of the square root of 9/4. Well, that's the same as the negative square root of 9 over the square root of 4. The square root of 9 is 3, so we have a -3. The square root of 4 is 2. -3/2 is -1.5. So that means we're going to be about right here, just above our -1.6. And that is the negative square root of 9/4. It's kind of crowded on this number line. And then the last one we're asked to place is negative square root 10. So we have to punch that in a calculator, and we will see that is about negative 3.16, and that goes on for a while, so I'm just going to round it there. So negative 3.16, that's going to be not quite 1/5 of the way between negative 3 and negative 4, so I'm going to put that about here, and that is negative square root 10. So this is what it's looking for on your number line. Some of the values you're given, you're going to need to punch into a calculator to see what they are. Please actually write out what these are. If you are not given the answer in decimal form, please write down what that actual answer is, because I'm going to need to be able to see what decimal answer you think you have. Okay, so sorry about that with the sheet. My virtual whiteboard lost connection. Okay, so now let's move on. And number 4, I'm sorry, is just like number 10 that I assigned as homework. Oh, and then part K of this asks, which of the numbers in parts A through J are irrational? Well, the irrational ones are going to be the square root of 3 and the square root of 10. Everything else is rational. Negative 4 is an integer. 2.5 can be 25/10. Negative 1.6 can be negative 16/10. Square root 9 is 3. 5/6 obviously is already written as a fraction of 2 integers. Square root 3 cannot be written that way. Negative 7/3 already written as a fraction. 0.3 repeating, all repeating decimals can be written as a fraction. Negative of the square root of 9/4, well, that actually is a rational number because 9 and 4 are both square numbers. And then we have negative of the square root of 10. That one is irrational. So our irrational numbers are square root 3 and square root 10, which were parts F and, sorry about that. Hold on. Which are parts F and J. Let me get rid of that. Okay, so parts F and J. Sorry, I keep having warnings popping up on my computer screen while I'm trying to do this lesson. So now that you have seen the video for number 4, you need to go work number 10 that's in set 3. Then come back and we'll go through the next problem. Okay, so now we're going to look at number 5. Number 5 says, is each of the following square roots rational or irrational? Well, remember, if the number inside of the square root is a square, then it's going to be rational. If it's not a square, then it's going to be irrational. So for part A, we have the square root of 9. Well, 9 is a square number. That's 3. So that means this is rational. For part B, we have the square root of 90. Well, that's the same as the square root of 9 times the square root of 10. So that's 3 times the square root of 10. 10 is an irrational number, so that is irrational. Okay, now let's look at part C. Part C is the square root of 900. That's the same as the square root of 9 times the square root of 100. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 100 is 10. That's 30. That's rational. I'm just going to put a capital R because I'm lazy. So my capital R means rational. Capital I means irrational. Okay, so let's look now at part D. That's the square root of 9,000. Well, we know that's going to be the square root of 900 times the square root of 10. The square root of 900 we already found was 30. So it's 30 times the square root of 10. That is irrational. Okay, so now let's look at parts E through H. Part E is the square root of 250. Well, we can rewrite that as the square root of 25 times the square root of 10. So, square root of 25 is 5, square root of 10 is just square root of 10. That is irrational because 10 is not a square number. Okay, let's look at the square root of 25. Well, that's just 5, so that's a rational number because 5 is just an integer. Okay, part G, we have the square root of 2.5. That is the same as the square root of 25 divided by the square root of 10 because 2.5 can be written as the fraction 25/10. So this is 5 over the square root of 10. We have a square root of 10 in there. That means we have an irrational answer because 10 is not a square number. And now let's look at part H. Part H is the square root of 0.25. We can write that as the square root of 25 over the square root of 100. The square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 100 is 10. That is 1/2. That is most definitely a rational number. So for number 5, parts B, F, and H were rational. A, C, F, and H were rational. Parts B, D, E, and G are irrational. Okay, so number 5 is just like number 11 that I assigned for homework. So you should stop the video and go do number 11 and then come back so you can see how the next one works. Okay, so now we're going to look at problem number 6. It says, if possible, write the answers to each of the following problems in exact decimal form. Tell whether each answer is rational or irrational. So again, I'm going to use R for rational and I for irrational. So for number 6, part A, we have square root of 4 plus square root of 5. Well, the square root of 4 is just 2, but we can't do anything with the square root of 5. That's an irrational number. So we have, it's not possible to write this as a rational number because it is irrational. So it says, if possible, find the answers. It's not possible to find the answer to this one in exact decimal form. Okay, part B is square root of 2 times square root of 8. Well, we can multiply those two numbers together and see that we have square root 16. Square root 16 is 4, so it is definitely possible to write that as in exact decimal form, and that is rational. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and write my R over here. Okay, part C. We have square root 70 over square root 7. Well, we can divide our 70 by our 7 and we get square root 10. That is irrational, so it is not possible to write an exact decimal answer for that. Not possible because it's irrational. Part D. We have square root 49 over 2. The 2 is not included in the square root. So square root 49 is 7, and we're dividing it by 2, so that is 3.5. That is an exact decimal answer. That is rational. Okay, part E, we have 3 times square root 12. Well, we can rewrite that 12 as square root 4 times square root 3. And square root 4 we know is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So this is 6 square root 3. But we have nothing we can do with that 3. So this is not possible because it is irrational. Now I'm going to jump a little bit. Let's look over at part H. Part H, we have 1 over the square root of 25 minus the square root of 9. Okay, so the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 9 is 3. So we have 1 over 5 minus 3. That is 1/2, which is 0.5. So we have it in exact decimal form. Because remember, it asks for the answer in exact decimal form. You don't leave it as a fraction. You change it to a decimal. So that is a rational number. Let's look now at part I. That is the square root of 1/9 minus 1/25. So what we need to do is multiply numerator and denominator by 25. We need to multiply our first one by 25 over 25 and multiply our second fraction by 9 over 9. And so what we're going to end up with is 25 minus 9 over 225 square rooted. 25 minus 9 is 16. So we need the square root of 16 divided by the square root of 225. That is, sorry, I'm on the edge here. That is 4/15, which is 0.26 repeating, and that is rational. Okay, so that was number 6. It is just like number 12 that I assigned for homework. So you should stop the video and do number 12. Come back for the part 2 video so we can work through number 7, 8, and 9.